Not like medics. We don't go around getting hit in the head with guns. Private investigators, it's a little harder. The clues just don't appear in your face. You have to work for the clues. We don't all run around swinging guns around and drive Ferraris. It's not like that.
Someone who wants to start out in this, yeah, do it. Go for it. It's not the shadowy profession it's not Sam Spade. It's a good, energetic, interesting, productive way of contributing and making a living.
First of all, I look in their background, because a truck driver could be very essential if you're doing a job, say you're doing an undercover job, and he's got the background as a trucker. It could be very essential to you. You got to look at, if a man come into me and he says, I'm 40 years old and I've worked 20 different jobs in my life, that's usually what I ask him. I want to know about every job you ever worked, what you did, because that man's going to be vital to you if you're going to put him on a job, and you got to, say you need somebody to pose as a real estate man, or you need him to pose as somebody else. Because we pretext all day long.
You've just got to be someone who is totally committed to finding the facts of an investigation. There's no mystic qualifications to be a private investigator. There's no point trying to make out there isn't. It just takes that individual.
A lot of people think that you have to have been a cop or a police officer, some kind of law enforcement background to be a private investigator. Not true at all. This business is made up of people who are streetwise and are able to get out and get information. You've got to be a go-getter, which helps you get information. It has nothing to do with police. It really doesn't. It's just gaining information and knowledge.
Anyone interested in getting involved in this, first of all, they don't have to worry, I don't believe, that they have not got police experience. Okay. Is it helpful to have police experience? Well, certainly, I suppose any experience is helpful. A lot of work that we do as investigators, however, is very unlike police work. Okay. Again, particularly with my area, more so probably than any other area of investigations, we do no surveillance work here whatsoever. And a lot of police work involves doing surveillance work.
In fact, if he went to journalism school and he's got a good background in journalism, and because he learns the who, what, where, when, and why, he knows how to write a story, he knows how to do a report. And so and if he's got any intelligence, or she's got intelligence, they can work the streets and they know how to come back with information. We're in the business of selling information. That's all I have to sell to my client. If I don't get it, or they don't bring it to me, then I don't buy nothing from that investigator, and my client buys nothing from me.
We look at a lot of people who are in the field of journalism, people who work for local newspapers or radio stations or TV stations in the field of investigative reporting. They're great. When you have people, for example, that are researchers. A young lady we just picked up a few weeks ago who works for a large law firm downtown. She's a legal assistant. She's not a paralegal. But she does research for this huge law firm, and she goes into the government agencies and she knows how to access data. So we're looking for people like that. So what we do, we utilize her during our lunch hour. I mean, she's right downtown Washington. She's close by all the government agencies, and if we need something at the Federal Trade Commission or Federal Communications Commission or wherever, Department of Commerce, she's there in about 10 minutes from her office, and she'll spend 40 minutes there, 45, and back to her office. And she's picked herself up some money for lunchtime. But she does a superb job because she knows her way around these various agencies and how to access that information quickly.
Women in private investigation.
I think it's an absolute natural. I think that women by nature are inquisitive. We are by nature very detail-oriented. I think we're more compassionate. I think we can look at a case, especially if it involves child custody or marital situations, with a different angle than men would.
The interesting thing back in those days where there were very, very few female private investigators. As a matter of fact, in the early 1970s, I only knew of one. And in my firm, back in those days, I did not hire women because I just did not feel they would make good investigators. And it wasn't until 1976 that I hired the first woman investigator, and she surely proved herself and proved to me that women are good investigators. She did a superb job for me. She was with me for a few years. And since that time, I've hired many, many women, and in many instances, I find they're superb to male investigators. They can do things and acquire data that men cannot do. They're less threatening, and they get out there and they do the job, and they do a good job. I've had a number of women who have come with me that have gone off on their own and have established their own investigator firms, which makes me so happy. I had a call from one just yesterday seeking some advice. She has not been with me for well over 5 years, and she was working a case and sought my guidance in that particular case. But more and more women have come into the investigative profession, not only as investigators, but owners of agencies. And we find that as we got into the 80s, many women had either retired from law enforcement, public law enforcement, or had spent 5 years or more in public law enforcement and decided that was not exactly what they wanted to do. And they did come into the private sector, and as we know now, a large segment of private investigators nationwide are women. I would say it's probably 10%, at least 10% in the United States are women investigators. I know many of them, and they do a very good job. Very professional, very effective, and certainly people that I would hire had a need for a private investigator.
It's definitely an advantage being small, especially in like the surveillance van. But I do know it's an advantage looking younger and being able to be in a different crowd. As far as I'm a whole lot different than Pete would be. I'm not as intimidating as he would be. You know, I can go up to someone's door and I can get the information from them. Sometimes in a case where he may not be able to, and vice versa. But yeah, I have my advantages and I also have my disadvantages, like with my voice.
Well, it certainly helps in many instances to be a woman. Doors open for them that would not open for me. I mean, there's been many occasions where I have approached someone, and the initial impression that they gain is I'm a police officer, and they're immediately guarded and somewhat uncooperative. When I identify myself as a private investigator, then I find that the door opens, but they're still very reluctant to deal with me, whereas they don't have that reluctance with a woman in most instances.
Not because I'm a female, but I feel that a woman can do a lot more. We're not intimidating to people. We can serve process a lot easier because I would open my door to a woman as opposed to a man. And, other areas that we can do, people will spill their guts to women where they won't to a man. We're just not intimidating. We're just sweet and nice, and we're not out to hurt anybody.
There's a group in Washington, D.C. that started about 7 years ago. It's called First Class. And First Class has currently well over 250 different subjects that they offer to the community. Field of journalism, travel, how to meet a woman, private investigations. And my class number is 201. I was the first class in First Class some 7 years ago. My class is 2.5 hours long, and it basically tells someone how to become licensed, how to advertise, how to acquire clients, how to handle your books, and all the other aspects of running a private investigative firm. I did this on a monthly basis for several years. Currently, I generally do this on the third week of March and the third week of October each year. And it's in the evening. It runs from 7:30 until 10 p.m. And I generally have about 50 people in my class. It's interesting to me, the makeup of the class. The makeup of the class is about 50% women and 50% men. Back in the early years, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I had no women in the classes. But now it's about 50% of each gender. In addition to that, I find individuals who are either recently retired or who contemplate retiring sometime in the not too distant future, who are interested in making private investigations a part of their new career. So we get a good blend of people. But additionally, I find it very interesting that every class I've held has always had 3 or 4 people from the field of journalism. We've had reporters from the Washington Post and the Washington Times and some of the national magazines. And then we also have people that come in from various government agencies. They just want some insight as to what private investigators do and how they do it. So a good cross-section of people in my classes. And I have picked up, incidentally, some excellent investigators who I've hired, and some of them have gone on to open their own businesses. And I don't fear competition, because there's enough out here for all of us. The only thing I do fear is the incompetent person that gets involved in our profession, that tarnishes our image.
If you're talking about a young person that's like coming out of college or high school, I would tell them to take a course in criminal justice just to learn what the system is about. I would tell them to journalism, learn about that. In other words, if they took 2 years of criminal justice, 2 years of journalism, they would be an ideal candidate to be an investigator. And along that, learn about photography. That's a very important thing, because we're in a business where we got to not only produce the information, we got to show proof of it. And proof is in photography. And right now, they need to learn about how to use the video equipment that's out there. Because we have them come in all day long and they don't know how to shoot a 35 millimeter, but you hand them a video camera, they're lost.
It's really essential to be comfortable with the English language. And I'm not saying you've got to be, a great novelist. But you do have to be able to write a report. The report must be clear. It must be in concise order. You have to be able to tell your client or your attorney, this is what happened, this is when it happened, and make them understand what you're saying. So if you feel that you're weak in spelling, or if you feel that you're weak in grammar, go to a community college for a couple of weeks and take some grammar courses, take some writing skills courses, or read a lot. Right. If you simply read, you will get the cadence that you need to know. Then again, of course, there are a lot of courses out there. You can go take, journalism reporting courses, which I, request that a lot of my people take, because journalism teaches you how to think and how to write. Legal research courses, so that you can speak the language the attorney speaks when he's talking to you. The paralegal training, I think, is wonderful if someone wants to get it in this field, but it's not essential. I mean, you can show me a trained paralegal, you can show me an attorney who's got his, his JD and everything else, and he's a Supreme Court justice. I might not hire him as an investigator if he doesn't have inquisitiveness, common sense, and an attention to detail.
Well, here in Virginia, the 60-hour course, about 20 hours of the course involves a study of the rules and regulations for private investigators in the state, because we have about a 15 typewritten page of rules and regulations that govern private investigators, and they want to be certain that the person that goes out and practices private investigative profession is fully aware of what their responsibilities are, what their duties are. And so about 20 hours of the 60 hours is devoted to study of the rules and regulations. The remaining 40 hours involve such subjects as surveillance, and they actually go out with field exercises and do field surveillances. They do some photography work. They do report writing. They have a couple of hours devoted to appearance in court, and a number of other subjects.
I've taken certain courses. In the meanwhile, we go to a lot of seminars where people speak about what they do, how they do it. I read a lot of articles, but when it comes to formal, there's no formal. I don't even think that if you went to the John Jay School of Criminal Justice, that can get you ready for doing investigations. I think you have to almost be born to be an investigator.
We have right now about 50-50 as our students. We started out, it was one girl in our first class, and they just continued to grow, and we've got more and more students, female students. And it was one of those things that, they just didn't feel like they were, prepared. But one of our star students, I must say, she came to the class, one of the first ones we had. She was very intelligent. We hired her in Heart Investigations. She worked for us for 2 years, and now she owns her own business. She has 2 girls that work for her. It's kind of like Heart's Angels, I guess. And she serves all our subpoenas, and, you know, we use her. So I think that that's quite a story, you know, and she does very well. She's very busy.
Some of the schools are okay. I teach a course here in one of the schools, and it's I teach domestic surveillance, and I also teach a course on spy equipment and what investigators need to do their job.
What I've done is gone and got instructors who are actual private investigators or work comp insurance managers or attorneys to teach the different classes. So in a 40-hour class, I have about 12 different instructors. And it might appear to be confusing, but you can only be an expert in so many fields, and so we have an expert who, you know, does domestics all the time, and we have an expert that has investigative equipment and, you know, report writing and, you know, all the different aspects, including the legal aspects, which comes from the attorney. And a couple times we've had the gentleman from the Department of State come right from the licensing to talk about, as a guest speaker, to talk about the, you know, licensing requirements, which is very important. And by the time these people leave the class, they know, you know, what is legal and what's not. You know, when to cross the line, when you can get in, how much information you can get on a credit report and actually use, and how much you can't.
They are not fortunate enough to have the background and the experience that I had if they're starting out brand new. The library and the bookstores are full of books on how to be a private investigator and how to do certain investigative techniques. I would read everything I could get. I would order all the videos. There's so much material available.
Talk to other investigators, talk to attorneys. Basically do a background investigation on what it's like to be investigators, depending upon what state you're in, depending upon what area you want to go into, everything from very specialized. I mean, there's an investigator I work with up in New York that does only patent fraud. I mean, that's a very narrow area. You know, if you want to do patent fraud, go and get your MBA, you know, understand engineering. My cousin is an investigator in West Palm Beach. He's an arson investigator. I mean, he has a chemical and technical background. Myself, my background is journalism, reporting, and criminology. It's very, very broad. Find out what field you want to go into, and find out your local community college, what courses are offered, or your local, you know, college. The avenues are out there. The books are out there. Attack it with the same vigilance and the same intensity you would your first case, and you'll do well.
If we've successfully gone beyond that first step, I think then the next thing would be to contact some local investigative agencies or some agencies in a different town. Sometimes investigators may not want to advise or give good advice to individuals trying to set up their own agency in the same town because they may consider it as competition. However, that person should make every attempt to sit with an investigator who knows what he's doing, basically, or what she is doing, because there are a lot of women in this industry nowadays, and sit with them to get a little bit of a understanding as to what really goes on in the industry of private investigations. And possibly that person could volunteer their time, subject to them being appropriately licensed. They could volunteer their time with the agency, which would most likely appeal to the manager or owner of that business to share some information with that person, and so that individual can go out and have some first-hand experience doing investigations. He or she should first of all, of course, obtain the necessary license or licenses that are appropriate for the area that would permit them to go out to do the investigation. But that would be, I think, if I were to do that, I mean, if I was doing it all over again, I would certainly do that. Educate yourself on the statutes, and then actually get involved in it with an agency, just a few hours a week, or, I mean, if you can get paid for it, that's even better. But if you have to volunteer some time, then volunteer some time. You'll really get to know, because you can sit with as many people as you want, but until you actually go out and do that investigation, or do those investigations, you then and only then do you realize what's involved in the business.
Each state has different requirements for licensing of a private investigator. It varies from state to state. For instance, in Florida, you have to have so much time as an intern before you can get a license, and then as an agency license. In the state of Kentucky, for instance, there is no state regulation for private investigators. You can wake up tomorrow morning and pay $25 or whatever the county courthouse charges you to become a private investigator. There's no experience. Ohio is another strict state, and so on. Each state has different requirements. We've listed the information in our resource manual on licensing in each state.
Well, first thing to start with is they need to go to their local law library and obtain a copy of the statutes that regulates the agency, investigative agency. Now, how do they know what statute? Well, they can call the Division of Licensing in their own city or in the state capital of the state they're in, and ask them what chapter does our agency come under, or investigative agencies come under. In Florida, for example, it's Chapter 493. That person should go to the law library and obtain a copy of the chapter that's appropriate to regulating investigative agencies for his area, and he needs to read them because each state is different, and he needs to see, first of all, if he even qualifies for a license. There are a lot of reasons for not being qualified. Having a criminal record would be one, among other ones that would disqualify someone from having a license.
Originally, when I first obtained my PI license and I came away from the government, Florida at that time was requiring 3 years, I believe it was 3 or 6 years of law enforcement investigative experience, and which was no problem for me at that time. Now they have since changed that, where you can use any type of investigative experience to obtain your license. That means that you could be a collector for a department store, and if you were doing investigative work for them, you could obtain your PI license and work. Or they have what they call an intern program here in Florida, which is a CC license, where a C license, private investigator, oversees that individual for a period of 2 or 3 years. I don't recall what it is, and then that person trains them.
I emphasize this point because just the same with any industry as well as investigations, it really depends on you yourself. You can be a great investigator, but if you're a lousy businessman, you're not going to make a lot of money. So you got to, if you're running your own business, this is, of course, if you are running your own business, obviously you got to be able to be well versed with respect to handling business affairs, as well as being a good investigator. You have to be both.
I think if they're going into it, the first few years, I think they're going to have some money put aside, because it's a hard business to break into to start with. Just getting your clientele build up, the reputation you got to build up.
I think a large number of private investigators do work at home, and even those that I know who have very elaborate offices still maintain a home office, because the nature of our business is such is that it's not 9 to 5. Very often when you get involved with skip tracing or locating people, you're dealing with another coast, you're dealing with another state, and the time zones are different. I mean, I'm in Florida, but my day actually ends when California goes to sleep. And so you have to have access at home. You really do.
Yes, I work out of my home. Preferably, I prefer this because I feel that I don't have any clients coming to the home. A lot of private investigators use post office boxes because for security reasons, and we just, for our own privacy, we use P.O. boxes. Working out of your home, if you have a lot of employees, it's a different story. We maintain a staff of 5 steady individuals. We also do subcontracting to other investigators across the country. An office, we've had an office, and we came back to the house. We have a large house, and we use a good part of the house for the business.
I started in my house, and I was in my house 6 months, and then reality hit me. You cannot operate an agency out of your house. And the reason for it is, if you got kids, you're taking care of the kids. You don't get up, you don't get dressed, you don't shave. In other words, you're not motivated to get out and get the job, and the jobs out there. And so, after 6 months, I realized that this isn't the way to do it.
Investigations is a very general word, okay? There are so many specialized areas in investigations. There are people that do solely arson investigation, people that do solely personal injury, and people that solely do surveillance work. It's getting into a very specialized area, or areas I should say.
I was told that's a good way to go. In a small town like this, it would be difficult to be in only one thing. I think it's also good to do a lot of different things. I think it keeps your mind occupied, it keeps your people happy. You only do surveillance work, one law change and you can be out of the surveillance business. If you only do workers' comp work, you can be out of business by one change of the rules as well. So I think it's very foolish to let anybody, one of the things I try to avoid is having anybody get more than 15% of my business. Therefore, they don't own me. And if I lose them for any reason, I only lose 15% of my business. I know people in 80-90% of the business is one customer.
I recommend everybody specializes and get really good in one particular field. In my case, I love finding missing persons as opposed to going out and working a surveillance. So this is what I prefer to do, and this is what I target, and this is what I really want to do. But it doesn't stop me from doing all the rest or knowing about all the rest.
Keep in mind that this area is getting more and more specialized. This industry branching off almost like the American Medical Association. Years ago, everybody was a general practitioner. Now you've got specialized medical professionals in every area of medicine, and so too with lawyers. Lawyers, they used to be just general practice. Now you've got your personal injury, your tort lawyers. You've got your criminal defense lawyers. Those are just doing wills and corporate law. Same too with investigators. Again, most of them are still doing general practice. There are several agencies, however, that are specializing solely in one particular area of investigation. So if your interest is in accident reconstruction or reconstructing accident or crime scenes, then I would suggest the area that I'm in, and that is personal injury. It's a tremendous field and tremendous opportunity in this area.
Okay, as far as specialties are concerned, I would certainly have someone coming into the profession who has the qualifications or wishes to develop the qualifications to go in certain areas. Product liability is certainly an area which is a high-paying type investigative requirement. There are many requests for product liability type investigations. In many instances, it requires someone to investigate a defect in a motor vehicle, whether it be a bus or an automobile or motorcycle. But there are other areas of product liability. We've handled cases that involve motorcycle helmets. We've handled situations involving mechanical chairs. Okay, another area of specialty that I would recommend to someone coming into the business would be computer fraud. This type of investigation, there has been a dramatic increase in the need for this type of investigation, and someone with the ability to handle this would certainly be in a position to earn many dollars. It's a specialty area, but it does require good knowledge of computers. In addition to product liability and computer fraud, financial investigations is certainly something that requires a large number of investigations. These type of investigations are required by brokerage firms, banks, lawyers, and even private individuals. So financial investigations is certainly an area of specialty that could develop big dollars for an investigator. Someone with an accounting background or bookkeeping background would find themselves very qualified to get involved in this type of investigation.
What we do, as a matter of fact, when we get this type of investigation, we will call in experts in that particular field to assist us.
We get into security, we get into bodyguard service. We have clients that need that type of service. 60 to 80% of our work is security.
How long have you been doing this?
Well, I passed the state board in '84 as a private investigator.